Simplicity and solitude are both considered outward spiritual disciplines. That seems odd at first. Let's look at each of them a bit further. Author Richard Foster explains that simplicity is an inward reality that results in an outward lifestyle. Paul says it another way. Let's read Philippians 4, verses 10 to 13. I rejoice greatly in the Lord that at last you renew your concern for me. Indeed, you were concerned, but you had no opportunity to show it. I'm not saying this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be content whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether we're fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or in want. I can do all this through Him who gives me strength. The last part of this passage is often quoted out of context. When we do that, we are claiming a promise God didn't intend. We use out of context. It can be about self-sufficiency. Instead, it is about God providing His strength in any circumstance. When Paul wrote this, he was in prison. Paul shows us the example of living with an inward reality of contentment based on God, which will show outwardly in a life of simplicity whether we have a lot or a little. Richard Foster explains that simplicity impacts others in many ways. This inward reality that Paul describes leads us to speak truthfully. We do not flaunt extravagance. We share what we have with others. Foster writes, simplicity is the only thing that sufficiently reorients our lives so that possessions can be genuinely enjoyed without destroying us. Simplicity sets us free to receive the provision of God as a gift that is not ours to keep and can be freely shared with others. So, how do we live this out practically? There's not a specific list for any of these disciplines. That would be legalism. In his book, Celebration of Discipline, however, Richard Foster makes some suggestions. Buy things for their usefulness, not their status. This applies to clothes, cars, homes, and so much more. Reject things that produce an addiction for you. This might mean cutting down on caffeine or social media. It may mean finding a way to release your addiction to money. Refuse to be a slave to anything but God. Develop a habit of giving things away, especially if you find yourself too attached to something. Consider giving it to someone else who could really use it. Learn to enjoy things without owning them. Go to the library. Enjoy public parks. That leads into another suggestion. Develop a deeper appreciation for creation. Feel the grass, smell the flowers, listen to the birds. Finally, reject anything that oppresses others. Learn about fair trade practices and products. Turn away from things such as racism and sexism and turn towards God. Paul says being content in any circumstance is about our heart. Solitude is also about our heart more than it's about location. Foster writes, inward solitude has outward manifestations. There is a freedom to be alone, not in order to be away from people, but in order to hear the divine whisper better. Let's read about that whisper in 1 Kings 19, verses 11 to 12. The prophet Elijah is speaking in this passage. The Lord said, "Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by." Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. Many people expect God in some grand, miraculous act or even like a wind, fire, or earthquakes. Elijah learned that wait on God and not give up. He did this by being where God told him to be, alone and available. Solitude allows us the space to still our hearts and minds so we can hear God speak. And those moments with Him are what give meaning to our time with others. So, how do we practice solitude? Here are some suggestions. Find the small moments in your day. You might be the first one up in the morning or the last one up at night. Use that time to still yourself and be in God's presence. Make a quiet place for yourself. Maybe there's an extra room where you live. Maybe it's just a chair in a corner. Let people around you know that that's your place to be alone and silence as you spend time with God. Silence is an important part of the discipline of solitude. Consider your words more. Try to spend a day speaking as little as possible for the purpose of letting God still your mouth and your heart. Solitude is not the same thing as loneliness. Solitude can help us feel less lonely when we practice this discipline regularly and recognize God's presence more. It can also give us greater compassion and appreciation for others. Time alone allows us to enjoy fellowship more. Speaking less allows us to listen more. Solitude makes us more Christ-like and more aware of others. Simplicity and solitude are two of the outward spiritual disciplines. They may seem quite personal, but upon a closer look, they are disciplines that directly affect others. How will you build these spiritual muscles?